Hey everybody, Steven here. I know it's been a few weeks since I uploaded a video. Like 2 weeks ago, my computer decided to die. I had it for like 7 years, and I know for the past last year I was already meant to change it because sometimes it was just not turning on, and suddenly the next day it turns back on. Um, but now it's finally dead. I just got a new one. Pretty happy. I can really feel the difference, and even now when I'm streaming videos, there's no much lag. I mean, the CPU can take it. Maybe in the next video, I'll show you the type of computer that I got. Um, but today I just want to talk to you about my project. I recently had to present to give an update of where I'm at with my research. So for those who doesn't know, I'm doing something about Tahiti. Uh, I'm Tahitian. I lived in Tahiti for 21 years before I decided to move to New Zealand and study English. And I remember I was talking to this girl in the club, and then she asked me where I'm from, and I said Tahiti, and she said where? And I explained to her that Tahiti is this little island in the middle of the Pacific, about like 5 hours from New Zealand. And and then of course she looked a bit confused, looking at my face, Asian looking, but from Tahiti. It's quite unusual. And then she asked me, so do you live in trees? And how did you came to New Zealand? Did you came by boat? And I mean, this little story just made me realize how people can imagine places that they've never been, just by using maybe knowledge or memories of place they've been that are quite similar, and then from those memories they could create a Tahiti in their head that could be similar or totally different from where I know. So I guess from that I started to look into how memory relate to space and culture. And as you can see, I got my research question here. It's about how can architecture represent the cultural memories born of colonialism in French Polynesia. I think you learn a bit more as I go through the slides. And here on the right side, some of the topic that we'll cover. It's not really that we'll cover, but that's the topic that I've been researching. So making memories, cultural memory, Tahiti, and memorial. Memorial will be like the proposal, um, my proposed building at the end that I'd like to design. Okay, let's move on. Oops, let me click here. So first we're gonna talk about making memories. While I was researching the topic, I came up with this method of Loci, and which is also known memory palace, which is a method that help you memorize by attaching the information to imaginary place to quickly recall that information. So for example, if I were to memorize a speech, I would visualize a house, and then maybe drop the introduction at the front door, the abstract in the kitchens, and maybe the conclusion in the toilets. Um, then I would take a imaginary walk inside that house and try to recall each part of the speech. I try. Still hasn't mastered it, but hopefully in the future I will. But I mean, this idea of attaching informations into a landscape is also common in Polynesian culture. People would anchor stories into the landscape, into a rock, maybe a trees or a waterfall, and then they will become important markers to recall legends of the ancient times. So this is, for example, tell about a legend from Tahiti, that waterfall here. And you know, earlier I was talking about how people can imagine spaces. So in the 19th century, the imaginations was really boosted by tourism, and it was mostly done through postcards. I don't know if any of you have sent one recently. I know I didn't, but I'm old enough to know what they are. I used to send one before when I first arrived to New Zealand, like little pictures of sheep and stuff like that. But postcards were designed to convey a sense of place. The image will capture the memory of that place. For example, here we got Istanbul, and it will bring it somewhere else. It could be either a photo or maybe just a drawing, but it will give you an idea of what the place is like, and then this idea, this image will become a central sensorial recall for the people who visited that place, because they would recognize where the photo was taken. But it will also be a place for people who never been, and they could use that as a way to dream about the place, so that they could dream of that dream holiday. Then I went to look at different places of memory. So here on the left, you got the Jewish Museum by Daniel Libeskind, which is about the Holocaust. And for that, I was really interested in this those axes. I've seen that building many times before online and even at school, like we were studying it, but never really dive into it. So I wasn't aware about those axes which are underground, and each axis represent a certain aspect of the Holocaust. So here you get the exile, the Holocaust, and continuity. I know that this one has like a tower that's like maybe 20 meter high, and you go inside, it's all dark, and you look at the top, there's this light, and I guess it kind of, I don't know if it's meant to represent the gas chamber, but it's really dark and it's scary, and you feel lonely. And then here you get the axis of exile. From what I read, there's like a, I will need to find photos, but it's about people, I guess, living and going into the unknown, and facing obstacles and stuff like that. But in my reading, what was interesting is how the design performs and make you feel a certain way, um, and let the visitor decide where he wants to go. Unlike maybe traditional museum where it's a set path that you go around and come back to the entry when you're finished. But I will dive in a bit more into that when I do my proper precedent studies, and then so I can give you more photos and a better analysis of the design. And then I looked into the Musée du Quai Branly in France, which is A museum that display different culture from Asia, Africa, Oceania, and America. And this museum is really about France' relationship to its colonial past. Started to find a few videos on YouTube. So again, I'll dive in a bit more later on. Uh, but while I was doing the diagram, I found it interesting that it's kind of similar plan as the next precedent, which is the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii, where you have all the display area that's around a void. Here in the Cape Ronli, there's this void in the middle, and in the Polynesian Center you get that river, but everything is around. And I guess you can cross the river to go on the other side if you wanted to. But I mean, the main difference is that this one is a living museum where there's a performance. Um, the cultural center is really, it's like a theme park. It's really tourist oriented. It has 6 Pacific villages: Hawaii, Tonga, Samoa, Aotearoa, Tahiti, and Fiji. Each will display different cultures, art and craft. But it was really heavily criticized by anthropologists and other experts, saying that it was kind of superficial and lack authenticity. And that's something it's really important for me, because if I were to design a memorial museum for Tahiti, uh, I guess I don't want to design something for the tourists only. It's meant to be for the locals. Okay, so now we look into cultural memory. I think every year in Tahiti there's a major cultural event called the Heva. It lasts for about what, two months during summertime, and it's a period where there's a lot of traditional dance shows, traditional sports. As you can see here, like carrying the fruit or throwing the spears. And I guess it gives the opportunity for the locals to relive a little bit how it felt back in the ancient times. It's really popular. A lot of my friends are dancing in some of those. It's not club, but like dancing groups. But some anthropologists see this kind of pastiche of the pre-European context as a means for the succeeding generation in Tahiti to kind of define themselves. And they also note that the role of the past has changed. Before, we used to look at the past to see how things were done before, but now it's used to reshape our present. And then I looked into positionality, because every memories are usually seen as truth, but they're usually told from a particular point of view and a particular culture. And this relate to positionality, which describe how your identity influence and potentially bias your understanding and outlook on the world. Positionality, it's a matter of justice, moral justice. Like, people usually will remember in a way that kind of benefit themselves and justify their actions. It's also a matter of power, like people will make political or legal claims to kind of support the dispute, maybe about lands, properties, stuff like that. It's also about meaning. There's so many memories, so many people that, and it's obvious that people will will understand things differently depending on which side they are on, and this create a lot of ambiguity. Ambiguity. Yes. So here on the right, that's a painting of the Treaty of Waitangi. You can see like the European on one side, the Maori on the other, and of course at that time some of the Maori didn't agree about signing the treaty. And yep. So next one, continuity and discontinuity. So this painting was done by Michel Toufery. Hope I pronounced that right. Which is an NZ based artist with Polynesian heritage. Really like this illustration. Kind of show that fusion of British and Polynesian culture. So this is Captain Cook, and at the back is supposed to represent Tupaia. Tupaia was a Tahitian navigator and priest who embarked with Captain Cook in his exploration of the Pacific. I think in the 1700s or something. And then he came with Cook to New Zealand and served as a interpreter with the Maori. Tupaia saw the foreigner's culture not really as something that will replace his own, but he kind of used it to expand his knowledge on navigations, and he fused everything. But the discontinuity in culture happens quite often during colonialism, because I know in Tahiti there was like ban on the rituals when the Protestant came to Tahiti, and there was some ban on the language as well. Yes, so that's what I'm going to study, maybe about the impact of the first European on their arrival and how it kind of changed the culture over time. So now I'm going to talk a bit more about Tahiti. So if you didn't know what Tahiti looks like, most people remember it as the paradisiac landscape, lush mountains, blue lagoon, coconut trees. The funny thing is that image that I'm showing right now is not actually Tahiti. I think that's Bora Bora. So kind of tricked you, but I mean that was a nice image just to kind of illustrate what people usually have in mind when you talk about Tahiti and French Polynesia. And here on the right, just to give you an idea of how big is French Polynesia. I mean, it's not all that. I mean, that's the Pacific Oceans. You get New Zealand here, Australia, and I think French Polynesia is about this big. But it's right at the center of the Polynesian Triangle with Hawaii here, and I think Easter Islands around that side. So maybe in my research I'll talk a bit more about how and when Tahiti was first discovered by the Polynesian, which came from Melanesia, come through this way, go to Tahiti, and then from then went to Hawaii and Auckland, New Zealand. And this is little sections of the coastal area and how it was used in ancient Tahiti. As you can see, there's 3 different parts: the living area in the middle with mountain on the right, ocean on the left, and in the center it's also divided into 3 with the habitat in the middle, agricultural area with all the trees, on the right and the fishing area on the left. Um, it's interesting. Like, yeah, all the food places are on both sides, so it's really close by. Have some fishing. Go some pick some bananas and other stuff. Really traditional. This is not concrete blocks. I guess it's just meant to represent the corals. And here there should be some fishy. But yeah. So it was interesting to kind of learn about that, because you can see that the waterfront kind of changed over time. So that's what you have at the moment. That's La Place Villette, and that's where most of the cruise ships stops. And it's been redesigned over the years to kind of be a place that's more familiar to the tourist, to the European tourist, with the paving. There's some French-looking lamppost. Is it gazebo? But yeah, it's really a popular place. I mean, that's where they have all the food trucks at night. And here you get the typical resort hotel landscape with the house on the water, white sand beach, coconut trees, and usually that's what the tourists would have in mind, and what would be advertising in the brochure. And then a little timeline of Tahiti, Tahiti's history. After the arrival of the first European in 1767, I think right now I've kind of divided into 7 period. First contact with the European, then when the evangelization came, then when the French took over, then the colonial periods, and that's when Paul Gauguin came to Tahiti, and he was really famous for all these paintings. And then the period after the war, the Second World War, and then you get the nuclear era, when they did the nuclear test in French Polynesia, not in Tahiti itself, but on MORUROA. It's another atoll in French Polynesia. And then the period until now. So yeah, for those who doesn't know, in 1966, France carried out, I mean, during the 30-year periods, they carried out 183 nuclear tests. I think 41 of them were atmospheric, so they would look like that on the image. And then they went underground. As you can see, this is a map of all the test sites. I mean, the one that they are aware of, because I mean, there's a lot of information that's still kept secret. And this is a little diagram of the later tests when they were done in the ground, and that's where people are kind of worried about the radiations seeping out and going to the lagoon, and then eventually kind of contaminate even further the environment. And here there's some photos about the fractures that's happening around the atoll because of the bombing. Yeah, it was really bad for the environment. A lot of people got sick. The one that was working there, I think I read some stories about people swimming after the explosion, and yeah, it's really sad. I think that's one thing that was important for me, because I was born in 1983, so in the middle of the nuclear test, and I knew about it. I mean, I've seen it in the news, but I mean, I was quite young. I mean, like in my as I was a teenager, so I didn't really have much interest. I didn't really understood the consequences of having the bomb, the nuclear test. I mean, in the Pacific, because I mean, it was far away. We didn't see it. I didn't hear it, and I don't think any of my family members or people that I know went there for work. Uh, so I mean, it's only when I grew, when I got a bit older, that I kind of researched it a bit more and realized how bad it was. Um, so I guess that's what I wanted to research a bit more, this topic, and I think as a few months back when I read about the government wanted to do a memorial about the nuclear test, and because I'm doing my final year as well, so I guess I thought there was a good opportunity to kind of apply what I learned the past 4 years for something that would be useful for Tahiti, for where I'm from. Well, I kind of jumped back to Tahitian culture, because that was part of my aim for this project, is to kind of learn more about the culture and how I can integrate into the architecture. So I was going to look into the vernacular, so the kind of more authentic way of building houses back in ancient Tahiti, and how they were using the trees, the material, the stones, the wood, and to construct their houses. Um, so I was gonna look at the shapes and the process, and then I was gonna look at more the traditional arts that are still being used today. Um, like here we have some weaving. Then there's also what wood carving, sculpting, making jewelry, tattoo, and then the tifeifei, um, which is kind of a mix of the traditional in the foreign cultures, with those new colors, patterns, and kind of new techniques that the Tahitian learn as foreigner started to bring new materials. I mean, this will be used as inspirations to kind of develop new detailing of constructions for the memorial. Maybe will help me design a facade that could create a sense of place, one that the locals of Tahiti would recognize and feel connected with it, and because I wanted to develop an architecture that's kind of Tahiti. And so this is PAPEETE. That's where I would like to have my site. About a month ago, I went back for like 2 weeks, took some photos, and kind of visited Tahiti a bit differently. I mean, I lived there. That's where I grew up. Uh, but most of the time, I was driving, using the car to go wherever I needed to go. And I used to live. Where is it? I think it's around here. I used to live around here, but recently my parents sold their house, and we were living in the rental over here. And then I decided that every day when I was going to town that I was just gonna walk instead of taking a car. And by walking, you see a lot of things that you don't usually pay attention. Usually when you're driving, you have to look right in front of you, so you don't get into any accident. So I was just walking all the way to town, and then I went to the PAPEETE garden here, the cultural center, and then went back. And on another day, I went to the industrial area and then walked all the way here. It really gave me some good views of the city. Maybe in another video I'll just show you some more photos what I took. Here, that's where they have the ferry building. And then I did this figure ground, just so you can see the massing, and that's really an architectural drawing. You can see here, those are all the big buildings where you have banks, town halls, big shops. This one in the middle is the cathedral. But then you can really see the difference between this and this. This is like the houses, the residential area, and there's not much order. Here you can see there's like a grid, even though there's diagonals, but it's following a grid. Whereas here it's a bit all over the place. I think they do follow some type of curves. I think there's some type of rivers, so that's why it's at a certain angle. But yeah, this is another residential area, and my site is around here, and this is the assembly. There's a lot of admin building here. I think that's the main town hall of French Polynesia. So it's gonna be around here. And this is the current memorial for the nuclear testing. I didn't have the chance to go next to it because when I went to visit it, they were doing some work around that roundabout here where the memorial is. So everything was closed off, so I didn't have the chance to get there, but there's heaps of photo online. So here's a close-up of my site. I mean, this site was recently relinquished by France, and the government decided to create a memorial center. So I mean, that's one of the reasons why I picked it, because that's where it will eventually be. But like, if it wasn't designated, or I would have decided to pick a site that was in the city, because I wanted something that was close to where the people are, and also close to what the tourists where they would usually hang out and visit. Because the memorial, for me, it's a place where locals come and kind of reflect, think about what happened to them. Because I mean, the change that Tahiti occurred since 1767, it went pretty fast. The culture really shifted a lot from the economic sides, the way, the type of jobs they were doing, social life, and even the type of construction, type of houses they live in. So I mean, just like me, I didn't know much. I mean, I had to read books, do some research online to kind of learn. There's a few museums. It's in another district in Tahiti, and a bit ashamed to say it, but it's only when I went back like a month ago that I visited it. Um, but unfortunately for me, it was in renovation, so I only see like the exposition side of it. But yeah, I didn't know much about Tahiti. I mean, I was living there. I knew about the dancing. I knew about the food. Um, but didn't really know much about the history. So I guess that's what the memorial museum is gonna be. Um, just a way for people to remember and reflect on where they're from. So it's right here, and I think that site used to be the old Navy, French Navy Command Center. It's that building there. I don't know if that's part of it. Looks like a house, but it's pretty run down, and this is closed. Um, the site is empty. There's just like trees and tall grass. Uh, I think it was abandoned for many years. On the opposite side, there's like the Parc Bougainville. Don't have any photo here, but it's a nice little park. A lot of coconut trees, bamboo. There's a river, a lot of fishy inside, and there's a statue of Bougainville as well. And there's like two cannon. Um, I'll shoot more photos in the next video. And here you get that road in the middle, mostly for cars, and I think there's a few. This I think it's kind of like a house food truck. This one over there on the red is a food truck, just selling food. I know this one is called the Tiki Peue. I used to, I actually went to eat there. It's quite good. But yeah, and this is the back. A lot of trees inside. So that's where I am now. So I'm gonna start to do some design, just get some ideas about how I want it to be laid out, mm, and maybe the type of stuff I want in it. I know that the government has already created a team, so they can start to do a study about the memorials and maybe the things that needs to be inside. Um, but because I don't know, I mean, if you're from Tahiti and then you know somebody that works or has informations about the type of spaces and requirements that the government wants from that memorial, I mean, just leave me a comment or get in touch. Be really grateful, and this is gonna be really helpful. Um, but yeah, that's where I'm at. And like I said, at the end, I like to design a memorial museum for Tahiti, not just for the nuclear test, but for Tahitian culture in general, just in a way for to kind of acknowledge the cultural change and the impact that Europeans, religions, and the nuclear test had on Tahiti. Um, I mean, it's not my role to say if it was good or bad, but I just wanted to create a space and architecture that will help people reflect on what happened, and they can decide by themselves what to think about the event that happened. Um, yeah, I mean, that's it for now. If you have any questions or about the project, feel free to comment. But thank you.